This video is about the importance of opportunity costs to economic agents, and that's consumers, producers, and the government. This is part of Theme 1, 1.1.3, the economic problem. So just a quick recap. Economists assume that households have got unlimited wants. When faced with a choice between more or less, we'll always choose more because our aim is to try to maximise our utility, and we'll do that if we end up consuming more rather than less. Unfortunately though, to produce goods and services, factors of production are needed, and those factors of production are finite resources. So there's a limit to the volume of goods and services that any society is going to be able to produce. So there won't be enough goods and services available to meet our unlimited wants. So therefore we encounter this problem called scarcity, where there's not enough of something to go about and meet all of our unlimited wants. And the issue of scarcity necessitates choices. We have to make decisions because of scarcity, because we can't have it all, because there's not enough of it. Resources are finite, our wants are unlimited. That forces us into a position where we're having to make choices every single day, and that's what economists study. They study choices that are brought on by scarcity. Now today's topic is going to look at the costs involved, or one way of measuring costs that are encountered when decisions are made. So this topic of opportunity costs then is all about the cost involved in making decisions, the cost involved in making a choice. This is what opportunity cost is about. It's acknowledging that scarcity exists. If we do one thing, that means that we can't do something else. So what is opportunity cost? Opportunity cost is the cost of making a decision, measured in terms of what had to be given up in order to make that decision. More precisely, opportunity cost is the highest valued of the alternatives that were forgone when a decision was made. In essence, opportunity cost is the most valuable thing that had to be given up in order to do something else. So let's look at some examples of opportunity cost. So let's look at the opportunity costs that consumers face. So on the screen there is the new £20 note. As you know, a £20 note can only be spent once. Economists assume that we're utility maximisers, therefore we'll choose to spend the £20 on the combination of goods that will maximise our utility. Okay, let's take a hypothetical example. Let's imagine that you've got £20 in your pocket. As we've said before, you can only spend that £20 once. And there are three options. You could spend the £20 down at Starbucks. You anticipate that that might give you 100 units of utility, 100 units of pleasure. In your mind's eye, you can imagine spending the £20 watching the latest film at the cinema. You believe that if you do that, the cinema visit will generate 80 utils, 80 units of satisfaction. The third option is to buy a textbook, and you think that the textbook might help you to get a better job, but that all seems a long way off at the moment. So your pleasure from buying the textbook might only be equal to 20 utils, 20 units of satisfaction. So which option are you going to go for? Which option will maximize your utility? Well, clearly in this case, the best way that you could spend the £20 that would maximize your pleasure is to go to Starbucks with it, because Starbucks generates 100 units of utility relative to only 80 for the cinema visit and just 20 for the book. So you definitely going to spend the £20 at Starbucks, which means that you can't go to the cinema, and it also means that you can't buy the book. So those are the foregone alternatives. But which one of those foregone alternatives will be the opportunity cost? The answer will be the highest valued of the foregone alternatives. And in this case, it's going to be the cinema visit, because you anticipated that if you went to the cinema with your £20, you'd get 20 units of pleasure from that activity, compared to the book, which only gives you, or you anticipate only getting 20 units of pleasure. So the highest foregone alternative of your decision to spend £20 at Starbucks is the lost utility that you could have got from the cinema visit. It's not the lost utility from reading the textbook, because the textbook isn't the highest valued of the foregone alternatives. The cinema is. So this is very important. Opportunity cost isn't just what you have to give up. It's the most valuable of all the possible options that you had to give up in order to do something else. It's the highest valued of the foregone alternatives. Just as an aside here, when we talk about utility, we're describing the pleasure derived from consuming or experiencing something. And as it says on the slide there, the word utility was introduced initially as a measure of pleasure or satisfaction within the theory of utilitarianism by moral philosophers such as Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. So, for you as A-level economics students, what does the word utility mean? It means the pleasure derived from consuming or doing something. Economists measure utility in hypothetical units, which are called utils, U-T-I-L-S. We'll use an example of the sort of analysis that economists carry out using these hypothetical units of utility called utils in a second. So let's play a thought experiment. Let's imagine that you have a Saturday job and it starts in the evening. Maybe you work at a fish and chip shop, and you've got 5 hours on Saturday afternoon and early Saturday evening at leisure. And there are only two options. And those two options are watching TV and playing tennis. If you were to spend all 5 hours watching TV, you would experience 40 utils of pleasure. On the other hand, if you were to spend all of the 5 hours playing tennis, you would experience 41 utils of pleasure. Is this what you would do? Well, I'm sure some of you have already spotted that a combination of playing tennis and watching TV would be the utility maximizing option. For example, to glance here, the best option looks like to spend 3 out of the 5 hours playing tennis. That would give you 35 units of pleasure. And then the last 2 hours watching TV, so that would give you 55 utils of pleasure, which beats either 40 or 41 or any other combination of watching TV and playing tennis. So that's the first thing to understand. other interesting things to look out for here is that it's what economists call the law of diminishing marginal utility. If you look at the table, you'll see that as you spend more time doing something, your total utility rises, but at a declining rate. And economists call that diminishing marginal utility. We'll talk about that more another time. Okay, so what else is going on here? We could consider using this table to illustrate opportunity cost. So let's imagine that your boss phones you up and you've been asked to come in an hour later. So that means that rather than you having 5 hours of leisure time, you now have 6 hours. So what are you going to do with that extra hour? Well, if you spend the extra hour playing tennis, your utility will rise by 5 units, from 35 to 40. If you spend the extra hour watching TV, your total utility will rise by 8 units of satisfaction. So clearly then the best thing to do is to spend the extra hour watching TV. But what is the opportunity cost of that decision? If you choose to spend the 6th hour watching TV, that means that you can't also spend that 6th hour playing tennis, which means that you lose out on 5 units of satisfaction that you would have gained from playing the 4th hour of tennis. So the opportunity cost of spending an extra hour watching TV is 5 fewer units of utility that you would have gained from spending the same time playing tennis. So let's look at the importance of opportunity cost to producers. There's various ways that we could go with this. Well, as you know, firms employ workers. Their time at work is finite. So, for example, the opportunity cost from a school's point of view of forcing teachers to attend long, boring and unnecessary meetings is less time in the classroom teaching or less time preparing lessons. So as a manager, the lesson to draw here is that is to never sort of see time as being a free resource. If you ask your workers to do X in hour Y, that means that they won't be able to do something else in that same time. And that something else, the best option, that is, will be the opportunity cost. The amount of factors of production at a firm's disposal is also finite at a particular moment in time. So imagine that you're a Sicilian fruit farmer. You own a certain acreage of land. The opportunity cost of you deciding to plant more lemon trees, to grow more lemons, is probably going to be fewer oranges, because you'll need to chop down some orange trees to create the land needed to plant more lemon trees. Budgets are also important too. There are opportunity costs all over the place when budgetary decisions are made. So imagine a hotel chain. You might have a hotel that's desperately in need of refurbishment. Maybe it's a very expensive refurbishment. So if you go ahead with that, that might mean that you don't have the money to buy a small boutique hotel on the island of Sicily that you would love to buy, but you won't have the funds to buy it if you spend your budget renovating a hotel that you already own. So the same would apply with new products. You know, if BMW puts more money into developing electric cars, then by definition there'll be less budget available for advertising or for developing diesel cars or maybe for staff training. Yeah, so as it says there, poor old Arsene Wenger. So Arsene Wenger used to manage Arsenal. At one time, he rivaled Sir Alex Ferguson in terms of the winning the Premier League. He was neck and neck for many years between Arsenal and Manchester United. Then a decision was made by the Arsenal board that they were going to move to a new stadium, and this new stadium was going to cost a lot of money. So the opportunity cost of spending the budget on building a new stadium was that Wenger's playing budget was dramatically cut, and surprise, surprise, as a result of that, he didn't win any more Premier League titles, and he ended up losing his job as a result of an opportunity cost created by somebody else. So I suppose that's tragic, really, but that's also life. You can be affected by decisions made by other people. The opportunity costs of a decision made by somebody else might be felt by you. Okay, let's look at the importance of opportunity cost to the state. So at the time of the corona crisis, people stopped flying. As a result of that, Richard Branson's airline lost customers, lost revenue, was in danger of failing. So Branson went to the government and demanded a bailout of £500 million. If the bailout goes ahead, what would the opportunity cost be? Well, it could be all sorts of things. It could be no money available for HS2. It could be hospital and school closures. The opportunity cost would be the most valuable of those foregone alternatives. So what was the most valuable thing that you could have done with the 500 million if you hadn't have given it to Branson? We could also use Brexit as an example of opportunity cost at a governmental level. So let's suppose that the UK government makes a decision to pursue a free trade deal with Donald Trump. What would the opportunity cost of that decision be? Well, it probably would be the most valuable alternative that would be given up would be the UK's existing free trade deal with the European Union. Your job is to find out who the young person is in the picture on the right. Decisions made by one generation can also create opportunity costs that are felt by future generations. So, for example, if the government decides to build new hospitals and schools and they make a decision to fund that program using debt, that the future generations will feel the cost of that because they'll have to pay taxes to pay the interest on the debt that was taken out by a previous generation. So there are issues of intergenerational equity. You know, a decision made by one generation could have massive effects for future generations. So this is again quite topical.